On WSGW. Now, here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America, where we're always going to bring you interesting conversation that impacts the entire world as we talk about this social experiment called race. All right, so we're in the studio today. We got a great show planned for you all. I got a few guys that are in the show that we'll introduce in just a hot second. If you're looking via the social media platform, you'll see these young, distinguished gentlemen to my right. I'll introduce you to them in just one second. But as we often do, I'm in the studio today. He does not have a mic. He can only give you a visual nod, if that. And that's Jonathan B. John B. in the place to be, my producer. Certainly glad to be back. We've been on somewhat of a hiatus, taking care of family issues and things. Before I was coming into the studio 2 weeks ago, I found out that my grandmother passed away. So was tending to my father, and then the following week they had the funeral. So we are in studio live. Glad to be back with you. Hope all is well with you all. Hope you're enjoying. If you are in the Midwest, I think that's probably the only place where the concept of an Indian summer actually exists. But here in the month of October, we're still experiencing, at least for the next 48 hours or so, 80-degree temperatures, and enjoying this time before the floor falls out and we're back to our senses here in the Midwest. But for those of you here listening to WSGW, we certainly thank you for your continued listenership. We give a shout out to those who are in WJOL 1340 AM in Joliet, Illinois. We certainly thank you for tuning in. We ask you to like, tag, and share this for those who are in the social media platforms, and continue to engage us as we have a great, courageous conversation once again about race. Well, what's going on in the world? Democracy is under attack. Kevin McCarthy, our Speaker of the House, has been ousted with a vote of 216 to 10. 8 Republicans siding with the Democrats. We see that they decided to remove this, the Speaker of the House. What is going on in America's democracy? Is this great experiment going to come to an end? The world is wondering. This is the first time that this has ever happened in our history, so they're trying to figure out what exactly to do. I've heard recently that Jim Jordan, one of the beloved of the Republican Party, also probably one of those candidates who is a part of the coup, has decided that he is going to be running for the speaker's position. Of course, we know the Democrats, they are all behind Hakeem Jeffries. If they could somehow muster up enough support to get the position back. But it's going to be quite interesting. They're saying that funding for the war in Ukraine, which is really losing support in the Republican side of the chamber. Also things such as the investigation into ethics against Matt Gaetz. These are all things that folks are complaining about. And then the stopgap to fill the void for federal spending and having to do something that was considered, what do we call it? With both chambers working together. I can't think of the name right now. Bipartisan. Thank you very much. But the producer comes in, he saves the day. You can't hear him, but he's still saving the day. Bipartisan passage of the stopgap bill for our nation's federal spending was a part of what's going to take place. It's going to be an interesting week because over the next week, we'll probably hear of more individuals that are talking about a race for that top spot in our House. We'll see what's going to take place. In other news around the world, Tupac Shakur's murder, a 27-year-old cold case that has been out there and was standing for so long. And I'm going to bring those individuals that are in the studio. I think that they'll have a lot to say about this particular topic because they are all of the hip-hop genre age. And so I want to bring in the studio with me to my immediate right. We have Antonio Brooks. AB, give him a shout out.
Hey, what up, though?
What up, Doe? Then we also have with us community leader, Pastor Tara Simpson. How are you, Mr. Simpson?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
And not O.J. Simpson, Tara Simpson, not to be confused with one another.
Exactly.
And then on the far end, we have my guy, Terry Reed. Terry, how are you doing?
I'm doing good this afternoon. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. We're going to have a conversation with these men today about Black men addressing the issues of gun violence in Black communities. But before we do that, and in conversation, I think this is appropriate to bring them in to talk a little bit about this, because Tupac Shakur was killed 27. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago, 27 years ago.
It really does.
No, really.
All right, 27 years ago, shot down after a Mike Tyson fight. I can't remember who Mike was beating the brakes off at in Las Vegas. At Little Caesars, not Little Caesars, but MGM Grand, yeah. The Caesars Arena at MGM Grand. But he was, he and Suge Knight, who was also in the car with them, were gunned down. There's been a lot of speculation what has happened over the years. But now we have an indictment against a Dwayne Keith D. Davis, a Dwayne Davis. Those of you who are listening, Tupac was one of the legendary figures, iconic, in fact, of hip hop music. He brought what I believe the heart to the sound of hip hop music with songs like Keep Your Head Up, Mama, You Are Appreciated, and Brenda. I knew him and I met him initially just after he had completed the show Juice, which was out there. That was it's a cult favorite in the hip hop industry. What do you guys think about this Keith D now being charged with his crime? The crime, or being a part of it. He wasn't necessarily the trigger puller on this, but the story is that he provided the gun to his nephew, who had gotten into a fight and beaten up by Tupac and some of his security right after the event with Mike Tyson. What are your thoughts about this? Anybody have it? Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, my thoughts is I'm still speculative of that, man. I'm I guess you want to call it a conspiracy theorist. I don't know, but I just don't really believe the whole story as of yet, because it's a lot to it. It's a lot of moving parts to Tupac. He did a lot. He did a lot, man.
I don't think there's a lot of moving parts to Tupac at the moment. But however, I get what you're saying. What are you gonna say, Big T?
Well, I just think that he made it easy for them to do their job. And my only question is, what took him so long after he's repeated these things over 100 times, that he was in the car.
He's been bragging about it.
Yeah, he's been boastful about it, and I don't feel bad for him, and I think he needs to get what he has coming.
Yeah.
Okay, so you think that he is the guy, or you think that he is? Well, not necessarily. We know that he's not the guy that pulled the trigger.
Well,
but you think that he's involved.
The thing is, he knew too much. He knew too much about the program. He knew way too much about it.
You know, it's interesting because the reason that they were able to get him was because he just came out with a tell-all memoir of his life. And he was saying how he's the only person that's alive that was in the car. And he associates himself with the murder. And I don't think what I don't think he realized was that in Las Vegas, that if you are any way associated or involved with a crime that takes place, you can actually be charged with the murder of that individual. And so with him talking about his memoir, probably trying to get the copies and move the kits off the shelf, he then finds himself now entangled with a murder rap because, as they say in the street, he couldn't keep his lips closed.
I don't think that's just it as well, though. Because at the beginning, when we used to watch the documentaries years ago about it, they already had them as suspects. His nephew, his name came up. But here's the thing. What took you so long to do something about this? You know, because they said the police had as much as information as they needed to make the arrest. You know, my biggest thing was this a primary how can I say it, something that they really wanted to do, or far as something that they didn't really care about doing at the moment to arrest or whatever happened to Tupac, you know, because he caused so much controversy with law, you know. So it was kind of like sweep it under the rug. We don't care what happened with him, you know, and it ain't, you know, and it is what it is. But if it was anybody else, and they had that much information, I thought I would think the arrest would have been happening.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, you know, I think that that's true, and I think that the idea may have been, as a part of this goes on, you can always catch people who are affiliated with a murder, but if you can catch somehow them slipping and get information on who the actual trigger puller was, then that's the actual prize. Now looking at the situation and him being the only one that is alive that was a part of that 2-car situation, because I believe there were 2 cars, a Tupac's car and another car pulled up next to him. They kind of, I just think they threw in the towels and look, he's the only one that we can actually get on this,
and everybody else is
everybody else is gone. You know, street
Wow.
justice sort of. You know, I mean, you know, you do the crime, you pay the time. Sometimes you don't make it to a jailhouse, but sometimes the antics that you've sown come back and they bite you in the behind.
Yep.
But nobody's feeling sorry about this. Now, this is interesting because I didn't realize that this was 1996 that Tupac was killed. In 1995, I was a senior at Michigan State University. 1994, I was a sophomore, a junior at Michigan State University. And Tupac they were just getting ready to release Juice, the movie. And I didn't know who he was. You know, I heard his music on the radio. I think at that time it was "Keep Your Head Up," you know, "Ooh Child," you know, doing his little piece. Yeah. You liked where that sounded?
No, I just didn't. How you say you didn't know who Tupac was?
Well, I mean, no, at this time, because
did you not have a radio back then?
No, I had a radio,
okay.
But what I'm saying is that other than hearing him as an emerging artist on the radio, you know, he was kind of just coming out, emerging, being his guy. And I was on campus at MSU, and we had him come down he was going to be the host for like a campus fashion show or something. And dude came in, and this is crazy. I remember being in the dorm room with some of the people that were putting the event on, and I was in the production that they were doing. And he came in, and I remember like, this dude is really crazy. And I had just seen the movie Juice. And I was like, this dude is crazy. Like his character is in this movie. And I thought it was the craziest thing on the planet. We had that event. And if anyone remembers, he was involved in an assault case in East Lansing.
I remember
because of what went down with the concert that he was at.
Yep.
And so he came back a couple of times to deal with this. So I had that's my Tupac story. Amazing artist, prolific artist. He was a genius in his own right. A star taken too soon. So we're glad to see that there's finally going to be some justice for his mother and his family, his brothers, because this was one of those stars that has gone too soon. He was not an Eagle Scout by any means. He's had his own run-ins with the law. But as it relates to the development and the definition of what we consider hip-hop music today, how would you guys rank Tupac in the his position in the history of hip hop?
Well, me personally, I think the guy was articulate. He was smart.
Absolutely.
Very smart. And he was well above his time, well ahead of his time.
Yeah.
And if you had to ask me, he was probably the best overall. I mean, as far as substance, the best rapper I've ever heard.
Okay.
I think his gift was way beyond, you know, because we listened to his lyrics, but when you listen to his story, a lot of those songs was wrote in 30 minutes, you know, and that's the part where we don't too much talk about, you know, how much he was like Terry said, how much of a genius he was. And I believe in hip hop, he set a lot of new order in hip hop when it came to different rap styles, because this rap style was different coming on scene than anybody else, you know, and that's what set that era to now people wanted to go into the Tupac era, but it won't, you couldn't copy him. It's just because he changed his rap style was just so different.
You know, it's interesting because as I said at the start of this, when I think about hip hop music and all of us, you know, I tried to get somebody tried to clown me on the other end of this conversation. You didn't know who Tupac is. You didn't have a radio. No, but what I'm saying is, like, really, when he was emerging as an artist, he came at a point when this whole East Coast, West Coast thing was kind of really culminating and at the heart of what was going on. But I think what made his music resonate with so much of hip hop, whether you were on the East Coast or West Coast, was the fact that he brought the heart of the people, the heart of the community into the lyrics of the music that he created. Talking about, you know, a mother's love for a mother who had spent time in prison and crack addiction, things that were happening during the 80s. When you think about the conversation, you know, Brenda's got a baby, teenage pregnancy, something that was so prevalent during his time, being able to bring the heart and the pain and the emotions of a community that had been plighted by drug addiction and oversight to vinyl at the time, and being able to express to the world what the inner city was feeling was the thing that made him so amazing. What do you think? Go ahead.
I just want to elaborate on that, because
go ahead.
Even though you said it was like 96, you got to know.
Yeah.
You know, he was already around like in 90, 91.
94 is when 92. I ran it, when I met him in 94.
I met him, man. Well, I didn't meet him. I ran into him in 91 at the Classic in Indianapolis. And we were standing outside, you know, and then all of a sudden we see this big crowd rushing, of girls just rushing and screaming and rushing and screaming. And then all of a sudden he comes out with his bodyguards, and his eyes was like all the way wide. He was so scared, you know, and this, he was so scared. He was so, you could just see the fear on him. And around that time, I think he was just coming out of rapping with Humpty Dumpty.
Because he was a background dancer. Yeah.
Then he did a real popular song with MC Breed.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's when through Digital Underground where we was really pretty much introduced to him.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm saying. So he came out, and people thought he just kind of came out of nowhere, but like you said, there was another group called Digital Underground that he was a backup dancer for, and that is the thing that led him and kind of put him in a position to have the career that he had. So I'm excited about what happened. My question was going to be, if he were around, had he not been shot, what do you think would be his impact or legacy on how would that have molded hip hop?
I think if he would have still been around, a lot of rappers that stars now wouldn't have been stars.
Okay.
You know, because of his transition on who he was, it gave a lot of people opportunity. When he left, it gave a lot of people opportunity to bring something different to the table.
Okay.
But his style was just it was so beyond, man. You know, Tupac overranked anybody when it came to just rap and just his style, you know, how the people loved him. And I believe that, you know, if he would have still been around a lot, we wouldn't see a lot of stars that we see now, because he would have clogged that space.
Since our conversation will lead to a conversation on Black men addressing gun violence in Black communities, and seeing how he was gunned down in the streets like an animal during hunting season, how do you think his death and the capture, does it make an impact, or why did his death not make an impact on communities of color as it related to gun violence? Should it have made a bigger impact in terms of how crimes like this happen, or how we deal with those crimes?
Well, I think it would have, if he wouldn't have met his demise at that particular time. He was starting to come into his own.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is he was starting to find himself. He was, even though his voice,
yes.
Even though his lyrics were things where we were living and things like that, but he was starting to graduate away from that. And because of that, because he was killed prior to that, it doesn't have the sting that it would have if he'd have been going into who he was becoming and then was assassinated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He got killed in the midst of making that transition. He still is impactful even to this day with some of the songs he created. But at the same time, again, if he would still be here now, his music is what's going on right now.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? It's just like Marvin Gaye was with Inner City Blues and things like that. He's teaching us about things that's going on right now and discussing things that's going on right now. And for me, he'd have had a following out of this world. I really believe that.
You know, it's interesting. And I keep saying, I think it was 94. I don't know. But I was at Michigan State. I remember I was an undergrad. I got that. And I understand what you mean in terms of him coming into his own and finding his voice, because he started off, Juice was his breaking into being actors, but then we got to see his more softer, vulnerable, aware side when we saw movies such as the one that he did with Janet Jackson. What was it?
Poetic Justice.
Poetic Justice. Another cult favorite, iconic movie.
Absolutely.
What was so beautiful about that particular movie is how much of his poetry that was incorporated into the movie. Some of it were things that Janet read, but they were things that Tupac wrote.
Right.
And so when we look at it, we were able to see those things. We were beginning to see him emerge. And I think this is what you were talking about, Terry, as a socially aware activist in this community, talking about the things that nobody else was talking about, being willing to be bold to talk about how the industry would pit people against each other,
right.
Those kinds of issues.
Right.
And I think that somewhere along the line, we haven't had a voice to emerge to that degree until probably more recently, with the exception of hip hop groups like the Tribe Called Quest and Talib Kweli and individuals of that nature. But go ahead.
Well, I think it's a by Pac leaving, it left the gap open for anybody to be able to get in there and try to emulate him, and all the Tupac fans that was left over still yearning for his music. They flocked towards the imitators, right? But then you had Pac said, I might not be the one who changed the world, but I'm gonna spark the brain of somebody who do. And then Nipsey Hussle came.
Well,
go ahead.
Can I ask something?
Absolutely.
Well, who in the hip hop industry, rap and things like that, if you know truly about Tupac, you have to know he was in theater.
Absolutely.
He
was an artist.
He was in theater. He was doing he grew up in a different environment.
Black Panther. He was a Black Panther kid.
I understand. So you have to understand his background coming into the rap culture to really appreciate him, because he was well-rounded and people never truly got a chance to see that part of
him. Too, his information, man.
Yeah.
His information was beyond. You could tell he was a book reader.
Yeah, exactly.
You could tell he was a book reader.
Avid book reader.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask this question. Because when we look at Tupac, he was a very polarized, when it came to race, a very polarizing figure. And we're going to get to the topic that's at hand, but I want to ask this question. Being the son of a Black Panther, his mother, Afeni Shakur, also a member of the Black Panthers. We see his avid love for reading. So he was an intellectual individual.
Absolutely.
Do you think that is one of the things that made him feared by white America?
I think the fact that he wasn't scared, because we got to remember that story. When he was riding down the street, when he left the studio, and he saw two white men beating up a black man, and he stopped his limo and asked them what was going on. They ended up being two off-duty officers. They had stolen guns out of evidence from the police station, shot at him. He shot both of them, and he didn't get to do a day, because they had illegal weapons, and they was doing something illegal under the influence of alcohol and drugs.
I think and then too, that's good, Tonio. And I think too, the information of being awoken on history, being awoken on what we know, what he knew as of how we were treated as a people. I think that sometimes brings fear into people when you acknowledge who you are and what you know.
Right.
That some people try to suppress that. So when you find that information and it's a difference. You get treated different.
Yeah, I believe him being who he was at the end hurt him more than it helped him.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is because he allowed the anger, the hip hop culture, to dictate how he was and how he acted. He truly could have took what he knew with books and changed and transformed the way white America, the police department, and everybody else picture us. If he'd have took on, hey, this is just a facade. This is what I'm doing, but this is who I am. This is the knowledge that I possess.
He ain't separated.
He didn't separate the two.
So instead of being impacted by the culture, impact the culture with what you have.
Exactly.
We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back.
Perfect.
We're going to be talking about Black men addressing gun violence in Black communities. Stay, don't go away. We'll be back with more United Shades of Gray.
You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
This is Kareem. We're back with more United Shades of Gray, conversations of race in America. For those of you who are listening, we are going to have a conversation about Black men addressing the issues of guns violence in Black communities. We ended our first half of conversation talking about the hip-hop artist Tupac Shakur finally getting some form of justice after 27 years with someone being charged with his murder. Also, before we get to this conversation, I must also just pay respect to Dianne Feinstein, who died on September 29th, the longest running term senator in the game, 90 years old, died at her home in Washington, D.C. She is the Democrat senator out of California. Really notable part of this conversation for her assault weapons style ban that was passed by President Clinton. And so may she rest in peace. We're so delighted to have the men that are in the house with me on today. So, brothers, I want to get into a conversation. I was on a radio program once being interviewed, and we were talking about the issue of police brutality. And the question that I was asked by the host of the show was, you know what? I see Black people get mad about what police officers do to Black individuals, young Black men and women, and the community is outraged and they're upset and they protest. But why doesn't that anger that exists in those moments carry over into conversations about what happens when young Black men are killing young Black men? They use the term Black on Black crime, which I had to express and explain to them that that's really a misnomer, that idea doesn't exist because you kill, shoot, rob, steal from people that you live near. But when you think about the plague of violence that has shaken communities in Black America, and I'm opening this up for whomever would like to answer this question. How do you, when you hear that, what are you going to do about the crime in your community? What comes to mind? How does it make you feel? And then what are your thoughts about it?
It made me feel like that's a question that whoever is asking it, they need to ask themselves too, because it's just not one person's responsibility. It's all of us. We all have to have some type of accountability in what's going on in our community. Us as elders, we need to be trying to lead the young folks and show them a better way and figure out a way that, we can come together and try to eradicate some of these problems. That subculture of violence is what we talked about.
Yeah. So what Antonio's talking about is that when we have this conversation, we have talk about how we can impact violence in our communities. It's not just a one thing. You push the button off and violence stops, but there is a subculture of violence that takes place that is so very important for us to address. And I think it's super duper important. Go ahead, Terry. You're going to say something that's related to this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would. We have to ask ourselves, why are we so forgiving? Why do we forget? Why do we march and then the next week we back doing what we've been doing? You know what I mean? So there has to be pressure, consistent pressure placed on our beliefs and our feelings and our emotions. We forgiven. In this historic, we just too forgiving of a people. And we need to keep the foot on the necks to those that are not only responsible for the violence, but those that are supposed to be policing these situations and hearing our voices. And you get to a point where you get tired of talking about it because you feel over and over again there's nothing going to be done about it. That's why we have to govern our own and take care of that ourselves and not be as forgiving as we've been in the past.
All right. I want to, you brought up the idea of policing and as Black men, I think this is a great conversation. We often don't have conversations with Black men about Black communities. And when you talk about the issue of policing, where has the concept or the idea of policing taking a wrong turn, or do you think it's taking a wrong turn as it relates to communities of color? Yes, Terry.
Ask me. Well, I'll give you an example first. We have a tendency to talk with our hands, right? we see that as just talking. Other cultures see that as
aggressive.
Aggressive. So how would you put people in our community that find us having a conversation aggressive and expect a different outcome? You place the people that are policing in our areas and understand that when we're talking with our hands, it's just us having a conversation. A lot of times the situation is heightened when you have people of color policing us, and they don't understand our culture and how we move. And because of that, that's where some of those problems are created. How many times have we saw the video and they say, stop resisting, or we don't be resisting. We talking.
Absolutely.
None whatsoever.
Yeah. So put our own in our communities and let them police us. That's how I see it.
And I want to just add too, when it comes down to the law represent crime control. It don't represent crime prevention. And so crime prevention is we have to do something outside of what they're doing.
That's good.
To make sure that our children is safe. That's why we came up with this help. And so when you think about that, and when you think about the way that they come at us, and if they kill, let's say white police kill a black man, our anger is coming from, what is your attention? What is you doing? What is you implementing? Because if we don't say nothing now, sooner or later you'll be able to lynch black people, and
we'll be going
nothing
backwards
to be said. And so it ain't that we have we don't fight against, or we don't hurt when another black is killing another black, but we have become so numb because the division didn't start from us.
Well, I think and what you're saying, to your point, Pastor Simpson, is that the relationship between blacks and police is not something that just started, but it has been since the abolition of slavery. Police were a way to incarcerate and put blacks on those same plantations, because when we look at the 13th, 14th, and the 15th Amendment, when we talk about those types of things, they only referred to the free black man, and incarceration was another way in which those rights of due process could be violated, and free labor could be restated.
But it's so crazy because the law is often changed by what we do. Fleet and looting didn't come until we start running from the police. So when you think about everything that we do, they create a law for it, so that it ensnares us as a man, as a black man. And so if you got that ensnared and you got that created for us, surely your prediction is, if we can lock so many up a year, we hitting our numbers.
Okay.
So if we're not hitting our numbers, then we have to make sure we create something that we can hit our numbers. So it's way beyond us being in the community. It's over our heads.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're saying is very important, and it's one of the major reasons why. And since we're having this conversation, so many black men have been turned off by our politics, by political systems. We had a conversation.
Absolutely.
I'm not into politics, but the fact of the matter, what you said, Pastor Simpson, is very true. If we can create laws that seemingly in so many ways block folks of whatever color, race, whatever the religion is, situation, then it would seem to me that one of the key things that we would want to do as black men is to get black men involved in the political process. It means that we would want to begin to talk about what are things that are important to the village. What is our agenda that we need to talk? Who are people that are friendly to us when it's time for voting time, but disappear when it's time for action to take place?
Exactly.
So if anyone should be a political representative or someone who's very involved in the political system in America, it should be the black man who has suffered injustice to the greatest degree of any other body that exists in this nation.
Good point.
But the black man is standing on the same morals that we standing on as black men that don't have a political interest. We need somebody like that, because if we got somebody that could be easily swayed, then he might as well not be black. He might as well be somebody that's, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because we need people that could be an advocate as a peer. So if you know what we going through, what we missing, like we need culturally competent police officers, people that's culturally in the know of yeah, he talking with his hands, or he using this, he cuss because that's just the way he talk.
Oh, okay.
You know, or people that understand.
I want to take that point and I want to take it back to in Black communities. Do you think that we look for individuals such as police officers and other individuals to deal with the issues that may better be addressed by we ourselves, meaning the Black men of a community? Do you think, or is there a place that we need to really begin to engage? And I think that's kind of what, when we look at the help and we're talking to these individuals, and all of us that are here that are part of this conversation are a part of a new community-based organization. It's not run by the mayor's office, not by a city council, but a group of concerned Black men who are saying enough is enough as it relates to gun violence in our community. So we've taken on responsibility of the fact that we've got a role to play in the cessation of violence in our community. What role do Black men play in the cessation and the fight against gun violence in our communities?
I think we need to start holding our people more accountable, no matter who it is. Because I know that, we got that this no snitching and everything like that. That's fine. Because there's levels to snitching, right? If I'm doing deals with somebody, or if I'm willingly making some side things happen that's illegal, and then I go back and tell, like, yeah, I know he doing such and such. But if you seen somebody breaking Miss Johnson house, and she's a 65-year-old lady that don't bother nobody, and she didn't had a heart attack in there, let somebody know somebody just went in that lady house. You know what I mean? I ain't talking about your little street dealings or whatever.
So snitching is not telling when crime is happening. That's what you're saying. Is snitching ain't saying, look, yeah, you did this, you're wrong. Snitching is when you have an agreement to be a party to crime, and you turn your back on the situation. Is that what you're saying?
If I'm telling something, I ain't snitching because I ain't in your games.
And that's what you're saying. You're not a party to that crime element.
You're a citizen. We citizens.
Yeah, and so we pay taxes to protect where we live. And so when we don't get that protection of where we live, then we have obligations to take on responsibility to do what needs to be done in our communities. Like you said, as help really came forth because ain't nobody else gonna come help us. No one else gonna come help us, and so we decided to help ourselves.
That's it.
Okay, and I think that's important. We always say that nobody's coming in with an S on their chest to save the day in our community. This ain't happening. So HELP is an organization that was started by community Black men to attack the issue of gun violence in our community. We believe that this is going to be a signature way for many communities of color to begin to engage. We've seen this happen. This is not the first time that we've seen this in communities of color, but it's the first time we've seen it in our particular area. HELP stands for healing, engagement, love, and presence, understanding that there is a healing that needs to take place, that violence is really a tantrum of the soul. Being engaged means having conversations, courageous conversations with young folks who are often finding themselves entangled at the center of violent situations, showing them that love conquers all, really.
That's right.
The word gives us, that love covers a multitude of sins, and that our presence as Black men has a meaningful impact to end the violence that happens in our community. All right. Why help? Why this type of platform, fellas?
Because as a Black man, and where we're standing is where so many Black men has been absent. As I can go back, my son 24, I can go back to when I was going to school with him and going to his class. The absentees of Black men is terrible.
Well, I got to correct you on that. Okay, as a Black man to another Black man, I don't want us to buy into a stereotype type. I think that it's been terrible across the board. I just want to, because I know that other people that are hearing this will say that Black families, Black fathers leave families more than white fathers. And the reality is the statistics and tests have proven that Black men are more prevalent and more involved in their children's lives on a day-to-day basis than any other racial group of makeup of people. So, but the fact that we do have an absence of any kind is a detriment. Absolutely.
And so when you think about any help of of our communities, I think it goes into the point where we have become so immune because of what we have witnessed, what we have seen through childhood scars, how we have been treated far as from police, that we have become so immune to of doing anything in our community, because if in order for change to come, someone has to change.
Yeah.
And so no matter what neighborhood you go to, if that person don't want to change, ain't nothing going to happen. Right. And so we have to come and bring a core group that can come not outside of the neighborhood, but come from inside the neighborhood to show them that the change is coming from the inside, so that we can create more space on what we need to do to make our communities better.
Exactly. And I think that to piggyback on that, bro, we need to make sure that we don't get caught up in this whirlwind of, because everything that's wrong right now, everything that is right is really wrong, and everything that's wrong is right. Everything upside down. You know what I'm saying? It's like everything that how we was raised. I ain't gonna get political or I ain't gonna get religious, but how we was raised, and we know how we was raised. All of that stuff, all of those morals that our grandmama and our mama taught us is out the window.
And that's the absence.
I mean, talking about. Absolutely. But you said that you weren't going to get religious on this, but the fact of the matter is, we as a people, the movement for civil rights started in the church. When we look at the values that our grandparents raised us on, they were values that were rooted in our faith in God.
Right.
And there's nothing religious about having faith in God.
Right.
Let me say that. So we got to get back to some of those old school values, and to the point where we can correct our neighbors and the kids down the street. But go ahead, Terry.
Well, what I'm noticing, I can only speak for myself for the moment. The older I get, the more I look at my grandsons. And looking at my grandsons, I'm saying if there's not a switch in the atmosphere, they don't stand a chance overall. So I wanted to do my part to help other people's grandsons, so that in turn somebody will help mine. And that's where I am with this whole thing right now.
Okay, so we talk about, the addressing the subculture of violence. There's a lot that is going into help as it unfolds. We're talking about training and education and retraining. But let's talk about where we started with the concept of doing mentorship. Why is it so important for Black men as ourselves to be a part of a mentoring program, that we are, before young men, challenging them to make some serious, promising decision changes?
Why are we here? I mean, when you think about it, why are we here? See, we are taught growing up. Most of us had our parents in the household. We were taught about community and doing our small part in the community, and expressing time and giving time and helping setting standards for other young men. That's why we're here. And for me, at 55, almost 56, I got away from it, from 30 to 55, because we just really getting into this phase 3 months ago. So all it did is brought back what I was taught as a kid, you know what I mean? To do your part, to do your small part in the village. So that's why I'm here. And I'm glad that help has started because of that.
Okay. Do you really think that mentoring, and I'm playing devil's advocate, is mentoring really going to make a big difference with these kids in the community?
It will, if we be consistent.
Absolutely.
We got to stay in their face. We got to show them love. We got to show them respect. And when we do that, it will change. It will cause a change. There's no doubt in my mind.
And it's amazing you asked that question. I know it will, from just the very fact of the meeting we just had last week.
That's right.
You know, and how a lot of the kids came in to an unfamiliar ground. They didn't want to talk. Their hands was crossed. Their faces their mug was on. But when we were done, they were smiling and hugging,
yes, sir,
and telling us why they was like that.
Yeah,
you know, because we don't know what they're going through or what they've been through, or have they eaten, or do they got a place to stay? We don't know all of that, and so we begin to judge them by what we see. So it's very important that we sit and engage in them, to mentor them, to change their thought process, to help them in whatever they need change in, and to make sure that our future is secure with who we're gonna lead the baton with.
And Corey Pritchard caught a good picture. Remember when we had them in groups?
Yes,
KB had a good. I mean, Pastor Bowen had a good idea about having them write down what they wanted out of the mentor program. And Corey Pritchard's caption was, "This is what it looks like letting the future prepare itself."
That was good.
And man, that was powerful.
Well, you know, I think what's powerful is as we look at this, and there's other cities like Detroit and Chicago that have very similar issues that are going on in terms of gun violence. When we look at the presence of the Black man reestablishing itself as the center of, I don't want to say power control, but the center of peace in a community, what value does that have to young Black girls and boys who have never seen a Black man take on a role of leadership in a family or in a household or in a school? What is the impact of that?
It has the impact and value of what raised us. When you had that neighbor, made sure that we wasn't in the street playing when cars was coming down the street. When you had that person that stayed down the street, make sure that we weren't down there cussing without our parent knowing. And
as a parent, you could feel safe in the house knowing your kids outside playing, and they got to worry about somebody out there being weird, shooting, or about to try to snatch them on some sex trafficking mess. Now they got so much going on, but back then we was a village.
It was
everybody looked out for everybody.
What is our responsibility though? What is our responsibility to our city, to our neighborhoods, to our neighbor? I mean, just think about that, because if your neighbor has sons and grandsons and they're watching you and how you are and how you interact with people and how you taking care of your family, your wife, your kids, your yard, your cars, getting up, going to work every day, that's setting a pattern. That's setting a precedent. They need to see that. They don't need to see a young man, a Black male getting up any time in the day, got big cars, big rims on it, coming and going when he feels like it. That's not the precedent we want to set. We want them to see us going to work, doing our small parts in this city. That's life-changing for them.
I think and what we're all saying in different ways is that we've got to change not only the narrative, but we also have to change some of the visuals that
what it looks like.
We have to focus on the seed instead of the harvest.
Powerful.
That's good.
Right there.
Yeah, because representation is so important. And you know, it's crazy because we're at the last minute and a half of this show. It goes by so fast.
Yeah, it does.
But I think one of the key things is, as I always tell people, the formula for impacting any young person's life is consistency over time equals trust.
Amen.
That's so important.
That's right.
Just one last minute. So someone give me a last.
I learned something Saturday for myself. You know, just because I'm a grown man and an adult, I just assume that kids would say, if I speak, you automatically listen. No matter what tone I use, it doesn't matter. I was dead wrong for that. And that kid showed me, he demonstrated something to me. And I had to apologize to him because he deserved the respect that I needed for myself from him. So I learned the fact that listen to them first. Don't judge them. Don't say anything out of the way to them. Just because you grown don't make you right. I learned that. And I needed that for growth for myself going forward.
But looking at the response, when you took the time and you were a real man, and you apologized for maybe stepping outside the bounds of where you had the authority to operate, that young man in like fashion responded to your apology with an apology.
Yes, he did.
And we saw a change in his personality and how he was acting. So a lot of times, some of the things that we're dealing with are things that we create ourselves. We have to understand that people respond to being treated like a human being when they have the opportunity to be treated as such.
Absolutely.
I always tell people that if you put a human in a cage long enough, they'll start acting like an animal.
Yeah, that's right.
But if you treat us with love and kindness and respect, each of us has the ability to respond in like kind. I thank you all for continually listening to us. This won't be the last conversation. For information, send us an email at helpsaginaw@gmail.com. Thank you. God bless you all.